Good morning, Chairman. We're now live.
Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone present in the chamber and those listening online to the business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Thomas Sneath and I am the chairman of this committee. Councillor Bailey Robinson is the vice chairman and is also present. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed for this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. There is no fire drill planned this morning, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the chamber, exit the building through the reception, and assemble at the front car park. Please have any mobiles, laptops, and iPads on silent mode. The hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collected and announced by the Vice Chairman. I will try to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. I would appreciate contributions to be clear and concise and ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. Moving on to the formal part of the agenda, Item 1, apologies for absent replacement members. Andrew.
We have received apologies from Councillor Martin Christopher, with Councillor Stephen Bunny replacing him for this meeting only. And we've also, Councillor Vernon has just let us know that she's a bit late. She's stuck in traffic on the A1, so she'll be here hopefully shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2, declarations of members' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests. Do members wish to declare any interests? Councillor Sheard.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say on item 6, Chair, I would like to say on item 6, I am the County Councillor for the area, and therefore I would ask Andrew if he could please note my abstention from any decision-making process.
Wonderful. I too need to declare an interest that in item number 8 falls within my Lincolnshire County Council division, but I do sit with an open mind and will continue to sit as chairman during this item. Wonderful. Please let the record reflect that Councillor Sheard and myself have declared an interest in relation to agenda items. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2025. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. Members are reminded that we are considering minutes of the previous council term in relation to them being... Okay. In that case, that's fine. We are just considering the minutes. Therefore, do I have a proposer? Councillor King. And a seconder. Councillor Sheard. Wonderful. We'll now take that to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are a correct record, and I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Moving over to agenda item number 4, announcements of the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. I do have a few announcements to make. One, the government has now confirmed that it will fund the North Highcombe Relief Road with £110 million previously allocated by the Department for Transport. This funding is dependent on final approval of the business case. A public inquiry has recently taken place to examine the legal orders needed to deliver the scheme. The inquiry heard evidence from the County Council and others in support, as well as objections from a small number of landowners and businesses affected by the compulsory purchase order. Out of the 12 objections received, 5 were withdrawn before the inquiry began, which, considering the size of the project, is a very low number. The inquiry has now closed, and the Council is awaiting the Inspector's report. This report will go to the Secretary of State, who will decide whether to continue the legal orders. If that happens, the Council will be able to submit the final business plan case in September. A positive review from the Department of Transport will unlock the full 110 million of the government funding. Further details, including the inquiry timetable, are available on the County Council website. Because of the tight timescale around preparing the report and business case, this will not be coming to this committee. Instead, it is scheduled to be discussed at the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on the 28th of August, ahead of the executive consideration on the 2nd of September. Members who would like more details before then are encouraged to speak to Sam Edwards, Head of Highways, Infrastructure and Laboratory Services, outside of this meeting. Turning to highways, delivery more broadly, the Council has formally begun procurement of a new highways framework, which will support work across Lincolnshire for the next 4 years. This new contract arrangement will be worth up to 180 million and is due to start on the 3rd of November this year. It will replace the current highways select list and will cover both general improvement works and resurfacing projects. The framework is split into 3 lots based on project size and type. Lot 1 will cover small schemes up to 1.5 million, like junction upgrades and bridge repairs. Lot 2 is for larger infrastructure projects up to 6 million, and Lot 3 is focused on resurfacing A and B roads up to 6 million. All contracts will be rewarded through the competitive process, and suppliers will be expected to demonstrate value for money and effective traffic management. Early engagement has already taken place with potential contractors, and the whole process is being delivered in line with the new Procurement Act 2023. The contract is expected to run until November 2029. I am pleased to confirm to the committee that a visit to the Lincolnshire laboratory has now been arranged. This follows Sam Edwards' kind offer at our last meeting. The visit will take place on Tuesday the 16th of September and will give members a valuable chance to see the laboratory support highways work. A calendar invitation has already gone out, but if you haven't received yours, please contact Democratic Services. And finally, on a positive note, I would like to share that Lincolnshire County Council, along with our partners Belvoir Beatty, WSP and Collas, have won the 2025 ICE East Midlands Social Value Award. This award recognises outstanding contributions to local communities. Since 2020, the partnership has delivered 67 local projects with the help of councillors, including improvements to parks, pathways and church grounds. In 2024 alone, work was completed on the Wellington Nature Project in Gainsborough, enhancements to Walcott Village and improvements to St Giles Church in Lincoln. The team has also made a real effort to support young people into careers in engineering, visiting 12 schools, attending 8 careers events and offering 17 apprenticeships and work placements. I'd like to remind members about the upcoming Home to School Transport information session. These will be held online via Microsoft Teams with 2 identical options to choose from. One is on Thursday the 28th of August at 4 till 5:30. Another is on Friday the 29th of August at 10 to 11:30. These briefings will explain the rules around who qualifies for transport, how school catchment areas and designated transport zones are defined, and how the appeal process works. You only need to attend one session. Please book the day that suits you best. So turning to today's business, we have a busy agenda that includes consideration for 5 pre-decision items, 2 scrutiny reports, and I must stress the importance of taking reports as read, and I ask that our presenters summarise the key points and the type of input expected by the committee to allow ample time to be allocated to the discussion. We may need to have a comfort break after item 6, but we'll see how we get on today. Thank you very much. Now moving on to, do we have any announcements by the executive councillors? No. Then finally we'll move over, do we have any announcements by senior officers?
No, Chairman. This is Karen Cassar speaking.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on to the main business of the meeting. Agenda item number 5, Lincoln Bailgate Improvement Scheme. This pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 5 to 30 of the agenda pack. This report seeks approval for the implementation of improvement works to the Bailgate Lincoln carriageway with a focus on enhancing the long-term durability and structural integrity of the distinctive Yorkstone block set surface. The report will be considered by the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport between the 28th of July and the 1st of August 2025. It asks that the committee considers and comments on the context and determine whether we support the recommendations of the Executive Councillor for Resources and Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as set out in the report, and that we pass our comments to the Executive Councillors in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Adam Round, Design Delivery Manager, Highways Services. Over to you, Mr. Round.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as stated, this is a paper relating to the Bailgate scheme, some maintenance works that's required to a scheme that was originally installed in 2010, which is a scheme that greatly improved the highway street scene, upgrading it from a pretty worn footway carriageway highway up to a high level, high quality sets and slabs in the footway and carriageway. The paper details 5 potential options for this works. The option 1 is to remove the existing sets and replace those mixed with a quantity of replacement sets, but relay those on a mortar bed and surround. Option 2 is to reconstruct the carriageway fully with a thicker 150mm set on a new tarmac foundation. This is a high cost option due to replacing all the sets, facing potential issues with utilities below the surface and also potentially further archaeology. Option 3 replaces just the sets with a 150mm new set. Again, high cost due to not only the sets but also making corrections to the footways and other access levels. Option 4 is to replace the existing sets with an asphalt surfacing. So essentially laying this as we would any other public highway. Negative really in terms of the publicity that this would likely attract with local businesses and residents and potentially statutory bodies as well. That would prove some challenges for us to do this one, although it does have the advantages of being a cheaper alternative and likely cheaper to maintain going forward. And option 5 is to relay the existing sets on sand and with sand joints, as is currently the case. Negative in this, that this would likely be, we'd be in the same position as we are now in another 10 years' time. For those reasons, I propose that we recommend the approval of option 1 and to award a contract to do the works. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to now invite members of the committee to make any relevant statement and ask questions. Councillor Robinson, do we have any speakers?
Councillor Sheard.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the officer for the in-depth options that you gave to us. Having read through, I think it's perfectly clear that we should go with your recommendations, and I'd like to propose that we go forward with option 1.
Yeah, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Reading on the previous laid sets, I was amazed that there was the grout was sand, and obviously when a sweeper goes over it, it's going to draw it up, which will weaken the sets. On the new proposal, then the grout, will they all be sand and cemented in, or will still be used sand? Because another form of when you lay sets is block them up to each other, but that's all right. But once you get some of them moved, the whole lot gives away. So obviously, cement grout will be best. Will that be used?
Yes, the proposal is to use a cementitious grout and base to stop that movement.
Any other speakers? No, I'll just make my comment. So yeah, I feel that option 1 is the most sound option based on this new council's goal for long-term solutions with a 20+ year design life, low ongoing maintenance and preserving the tourism pool vacant with option 4. I also appreciate the timescale with January to March being when local businesses would experience slower business anyway, ready for when business starts to build back up again in spring. The risk and contingency fund is 254,000. Given the reuse of sets is based on visual inspection only, how confident are we that we will stay within this budget? Thank you.
Yes, the sets that have been there, obviously they've been there for about 15 years now. Prior to those sets being installed, they do go through a process that weeds out the weak ones, if you like, as well. So we've got a pretty high confidence that the sets that we are reusing are up to scratch. And obviously the new sets that are coming in have gone through that same scrutiny process as well. So, and we have some example data from an area that we've also done a little bit of a trial on as well. So we've got a high confidence that this proposed works will stand the test of time.
Brilliant, thank you. Any more speakers? No? That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. In that case, we have the proposal's been moved by Councillor Sheard, and I am happy to second that proposal. Therefore, we are voting on the council supports the recommendation to the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport, as detailed on page 17 of the report, namely that they approve the proposed Bailgate Lincoln scheme as attached in Appendix A, and I ask that our comments, as these have been captured by the scrutiny officer, to be shared with the executive councillors for their consideration. We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That is agreed. Item 6 is the Spalding to Pinchbeck Active Travel Cycleway Tender Award. This pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 15 to 82 of the agenda pack. The report seeks approval of the executive councillors for the delivery of a new segregated cycleway, improvements to existing footway and shared cycleways, and upgrade the junction to improve connectivity between Forge Close Spalding and Knight Street in Pinchbeck. The report will be considered by the Executive Councillors for Resources and the Executive Councillor of Highways and Transport between the 30th of July and the 8th of August 2025. It is asked that the committee considers and comments on the contents and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as set out on page 17 of the report, and that we pass our recommendations to the Executive Councillors in relation to this item. The item will be presented by Chris Miller, Head of Environment. Over to you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors. So I will, as always, take the paper as read, but I will just walk you through some of the pertinent points within it. So back in 2001, 2022, the DFT, through Active Travel England, awarded the County Council £1.8 million to undertake a scheme which was actually in Lincoln. But following a trial, it was determined that not to progress with that. So we've been holding that £1.8 million for a short time, looking for another scheme to deliver against for the DFT. As part of our general work within the team, we create and look at what are called local cycling walking infrastructure plans, or LCWIPs, you may have heard of. These form part of the travel strategy for the major towns and the city within the county. And they're developed through a number of means, but also through discussion with the community, stakeholder groups and the district council. And one of the routes that came forward within the Spalding area was the route we're discussing this morning, for a route between Forge Close and Knight Street. It broken down into 5 individual sections. At the moment, we're just looking at the sections 1 and 2, which will take the route as far as Wardentree Lane. Enterprise Way, beg your pardon. So it will create a route from Spalding towards a business area, which will benefit from that potential opportunities in modal shift for accessing that area of the town. 2 original options were looked at in terms of route location, but following public engagement in May this year, we've selected the route which runs parallel to the A151 Spalding to Pinchbeck Road. So yes, the whole route consists of 5 sections. It's separated from the carriageway and will improve crossings at junctions, the links to these amenities, and will have better signage than is currently on display. The 1.8 million that were awarded would be able to deliver as sections 1 and 2. We're looking at an approximate cost at the moment of 1.7, and that will take us, as I say, all the way up to Enterprise Way, with the option of going beyond that for sections 3, 4, 5, with money coming in out of the local transport grant going forward, which we were already looking at. We will monitor the route for 3 years post-construction, but there's already monitoring ongoing about usage, so we can provide some data back at a later date about how successful the scheme has been in terms of that modal ship and that take-up of usage, although we're confident that it will be a well-used route. Alongside this, the scheme is designed to be delivered alongside the planned resurfacing of about 700 metres of the A151 along Pinchbeck Road, and therefore that will help mitigate any kind of disruption and add to programme efficiencies. That's it as far as the report's concerned. I'm happy to take questions, Chairman. I have with me my colleague Dom Fieldhouse-Gray, who can answer any technical questions that may come forward as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris, for your introduction. I would now like to invite members of the committee to make any relevant statement and ask questions. Councillor Robinson, do we have any speakers?
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Can you remind me, why wasn't the 1.8 million used in Lincoln?
Certainly, Councillor Clark. So it was for Brayford Wharf East, and that was undertaken during a trial during the pandemic period as part of a wider scheme around active travel and trying to remove cars and create more space for pedestrians and cyclists and people wheeling. Having gone through that trial, having put it forward as a scheme, it was determined by council not to proceed with it because of the feedback that we'd had from the public on the scheme itself.
Yeah, Councillor Sheard.
Thank you. Again, it's not a question, it's just to say a really big thank you for all the work that has gone into this. I've been involved in the public consultations, I've seen the public and how they support this. It's something that's warranted for the area and it will only bring benefit. So again, thank you to the officers and I look forward to this going forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to add my additional comments. Yeah, it's clear that the local opinion is very supportive of the project with it being fully funded from the government. Do we have detail on the long-term maintenance and operational costs of the new segregated cycleway, improved footways, shared cycleways and upgraded future junctions, and are they affordable under current budgets? Thank you.
I may have to defer to my highways colleagues sat round me at that point. However, the route itself will become part of the Highway Maintainer Public Expense Network, and as such would fall within the normal maintenance regimes of the County Council. But for further details, I don't know if there are comments from colleagues.
Yeah, happy to contribute at that point. So from a highways maintenance perspective, we get our funding through revenue from the County Council, but the majority of it comes from the highway maintenance block, the Department of Transport. Sadly, the funding formula is based on the network length of the Lincolnshire County Council, so of the 9,000 kilometres that we have, it's based largely in comparison to other authorities on the network length and the number of bridges we have and the number of street lighting columns. So sadly, the construction of this through other funding is likely to create a pressure, but I would still be recommending we do it as a highway service because it's the right thing. However, over time, that progressively becomes a burden in terms of maintenance because the network length for cycling isn't included in that funding formula. However, on the larger scale, the more that we build in comparison to other authorities, that contribution is given to us.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. Any more speakers? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. If I can, I'm just trying to unpick what Jonathan just said. So basically, no. So there isn't any money for maintenance, because the reason I'm asking this is because I know that route very well, so I look forward to the proliferation of cycles that I've not seen up to now. But if there was money to be diverted, then for several years I've been trying to get the money for the Ruskington to Sleaford cycle, which there isn't any money any time I ask for it to actually bring it up to a standard, not to actually implement it, but the fact is that it's a very, very well used cycle route. It's proven to be, and yet I still can't achieve the funding. So if we are going to start moving funding around, then I look forward to that being considered in the round, as we've been crying out with it for a very long time.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, and noting your comments about the Ruskington to Sleaford route. If that's not already part of the local cycling walking infrastructure programme, Dom, is it?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That's Chris mentioned earlier the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. They're currently undergoing a refresh, so we've got 10 locations in the county, Sleaford being one of those, and the route to Ruskington is one of the priority routes there. So that provides us with a base to understand where the priority lies across the county and where we can utilise this Active Travel England funding when it comes forward through future rounds. And then we work with the community as well, because any work that we want to propose has to be evidenced through community need and engagement, as well as the data that we've mentioned in terms of monitoring with other routes. So, yeah, I'm happy to have any discussions about that in future. But for this project, yeah, it's all related to the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, where we get our priority routes.
Councillor Shear.
Thank you. And just to come back on the comment that you're aware of the area and you yourself haven't witnessed much cycling. I've actually been in touch with local businesses, and there's a lot of people working within those businesses who don't have motorised transport, and cycling is actually a prime route for them. The businesses are in support. They are offering cycling schemes where they offer their employees the options for monetary input for cycling to work. So it is a really valid route for the area.
Brilliant. Any more speakers? No, that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. I must say I do welcome this scheme as a local to the area. I do travel the area quite a lot, and it's normally late evenings, early mornings that we have the majority of the cyclists using the area from the local factories. As they are sort of 24-hour processes, you'll find that some people will be knocking off at 11 at night or 4 in the morning or going to work at 6 a.m. And I do believe that having a segregated cycleway is the most important part of this report. Therefore, if there are no other speakers, I move that the committee support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as detailed on page 33 of the report, and I ask that our comments, as these have been captured by the Scrutiny Officer, be shared with the Executive Councillors for their consideration. Do we have a seconder? Councillor King. Wonderful. We will now vote on this item? All those in favour, please raise your hands. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is agreed. Well, as we're getting on, we will move over to the next items. And I'd like to put forward a motion, please, to consider items 7 and 9 together. Members, before we proceed to the next item, I would like to inform you that in the interest of saving time and avoidance of duplication of efforts, I propose that we take all 3 items as one, allowing the presenting officer to take us through the 3 schemes that we are being consulted on and take questions at the end, as I am sure a few of the questions will be pertinent to all schemes. Do we have a seconder? Wonderful. Councillor Reeve. We'll take a vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is agreed. In which case we move on to items 7 to 9. The A6121 Ryhall Road in Stamford, SRS. The A17 to A151 Holwich and Fleet Hargate. It's the SRS on that. And also the A52 Levington to Holtoft End. These are pre-decision scrutiny reports that can be found on pages 169 to 214 of the agenda pack. The first report proposes a strategic resurfacing scheme for the A6121 Ryhall Road in Stamford. The section is suffering from deterioration of the surface layers and is earmarked for treatment to restore structural integrity and improve ride quality. The second report relates to the scheme that targets the deteriorated sections of the A17, A151 junction areas, which is both a key rural trunk road and a regional freight corridor. And finally, the third report is the resurfacing scheme for a section of the A52 passing through Levington and Holtoft End near Boston. The A52 is a principal route with long-standing issues related to surface wear, edge failure and drainage. All 3 reports will be considered by the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport for a decision between the 4th and the 8th of August this year. It is asked that the committee consider and comment on the contents and determine whether we support the recommendations for each of the 3 reports separately to the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as set out on pages 171, 185 and 201 respectively. Namely, that they approve these schemes and that the undertaking for all relevant activities for their realisation, and that we pass our comments to the Executive Councillors in relation to each of the 3 items. The reports will be presented by Steve Brooks, Senior Project Leader. We will allow Mr Brooks ample time to brief us on each of the 3 reports, and we will take questions at the end. Over to you, Mr Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. Bringing forward 3 papers, as you correctly pointed out, the fundamentals of which are all the same. However, just the explicit details differ: location, cost, treatments, size, etc., etc., with the addition of Ryhall Road, within which we're pulling in the replacement of 2 push-button facility pedestrian crossings while we are in attendance on site. So I'm seeking approval for the procurement process and approval to award a contract for the 3 separate contracts that we're being brought for, that we are bringing forwards. And the papers contain the details of the schemes, the recommendations that we are putting forward and proposing, which is full resurfacing, and the alternatives that we have considered en route to get into that position, and the reasons why we are not putting those forward as the recommendation. The procurement process for each of the 3 contracts separately will be a tender in a competitive environment through our select list framework, which you made reference to at the start. We're re-tendering a new one. The existing one is very, very similar in what it's achieving to the new one. The proposals are all supported by our legal and our resources, with the costs included in the Asset Protection Programme of Works, and they are funded by the Department of Transport's Highways Asset Protection Grant. The options that we considered and discounted, not to award a contract, and the inevitable will happen, the roads will continue to deteriorate, and then the cost will increase when fundamentally we come round to renew them and rebuild them. Patch and repair option to just try and keep extending the serviceable life, which is fine but only goes so far. And then alternative servicing materials to see whether we can achieve value for money within that department, and then recycling, which we feel doesn't offer the best solution for the roads that we are considering within these three papers. So our recommendation is to resurface, that's to plane out the existing carriageway, remove it from site, bring in new bitumen-based materials, tarmac, and resurface accordingly. That's the basis of the three reports. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I would like to invite members of the committee to make any relevant statement and ask questions. Councillor Robinson, do we have any speakers?
Any speakers? Councillor Sheard?
Thank you. Again, thank you for the report, and yes, I'm in total agreement to patch up or to do anything less than actually a full resurface. I think we'd be potentially opening ourselves up to having to redo the work, so I would fully support the proposal for resurfacing on these.
Any more speakers? Just a question from myself. Just bring it up. So just regarding the guarantees that we get from the contractors of their work, usually being a basic 12 months, do you have any data regarding when those guarantees are redeemed, if at all? Are they usually a few weeks after the work is done, or are they redeemed any time through the guarantee period?
Thank you, Councillor. Good question. It's not unusual for rework to happen, particularly when working at nights. It is a complicated job. The specification for highway works, the standards we expect are extremely stringent, extremely tight, difficult to achieve. So the potential for rework usually is realised within the first 12 months. The materials that we have chosen, the specification is also very tight on those, and the quality of the materials when laid and achieve the specification are sufficiently robust that our experience has shown that the design life that we wish to achieve, 20 years, is usually achieved and surpassed.
Do you specifically have any data regarding when those, within those 12 months, whether it's the first month, whether it's the middle 6 months, or towards the end of that guarantee specifically?
Not explicitly, no. It would depend when it's laid, of course, the time of year. There is a seasonality issue with regards to laying tarmac. Tarmac prefers better weather to be laid in, I think is perhaps the best way to put it. Winter is usually a telltale sign. If there are issues in regards to the surfacing itself, the very top layer, winter can very often show those up. But if it comes down to workmanship, for example, if it's not compacted properly, we get what we call chipping loss with the material that we see. So the gravel starts to pick out of the carriageway and will scatter across the road itself. That becomes a safety issue. We'll sort of impress upon the contractor that he needs to come back reasonably swiftly to address those quality issues. And I have to stress that this is all considered within his rates for tender. We don't pay additionally if they come back to do rework. That's all at the contractor's expense.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Grantham.
Yeah, with the full resurfacing, can we actually have a look at the base of it, see how thick that is on oil resurfacing schemes that you do around Lincolnshire? I want to know what the depth is, because it doesn't matter how good your resurfacing is on top, if you haven't got the foundation set properly, it's just going to crumble.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, very good question. In advance of us breaching sites, our laboratory that you've been invited to look round do an intense investigation and assessment of the existing ground conditions, the existing carriageway conditions, and they then target our treatments. So within our drawings, which I've made reference to in the papers, there are differing depths of treatment that we do. So the residual life that exists within some pavements is better than others. So some might be full depth reconstruction, depending on the hierarchy of road, that might be 200, 300, even 350 millimetres deep as a full reconstruction. Alternatively, it may be just surface defects, and so it will be 40 millimetres, maybe 100 millimetres deep, because the residual life in what is left underneath is deemed acceptable for us to achieve 20 years plus. You're more than welcome to come look at any of our drawings that we have, and I'll talk them through with you. Okay.
Fine. Yeah. Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. When the A631 was done last year, it was a long time before the edge of the road was made good. There was significant drop-offs in many places where they built the tarmac up to a high level, and then it wasn't filled in at the edge, and so any vehicles getting too close to the edge had to fall over onto the grass verge. They did eventually come along and do a little bit of soiling along the edges, but it wasn't whacked down, it was left in loosely. Is there somebody that goes along at some point afterwards and says, right, this isn't finished until it's finished? Because there still does seem to be, actually on that occurrence, areas where the edge of the road hasn't been, not the edge of the road, the grass verge hasn't been made good to bring up to a level standard, so it creates a drop-off point. And I'm just worried about all this work that's going to be done. Is it going to be completed? The tarmac might be done, but is the edges of the grass verge is going to be completed as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The simple answer to your question is yes. Okay. Slightly longer version to that is, as part of our contracts, we do verge reinstatement. We trim it down to level such that we get better drainage off the edge of the carriageway, which helps protect the edge of the carriageway that's vulnerable to degradation and premature failure. So we like to trim our verges down such that they are level or slightly less than the edge of the tarmac, but where it is low, we also have within our contracts facility for building up. Our supervisors that supervise the work, Lincolnshire County Council representatives and employees, are charged with that responsibility to making sure that when we leave site, it is all made good and left suitable and safe for the network user.
Thank you.
Any more speakers? No, that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. And I would like to personally thank Mr. Brooks for answering a lot of questions prior to this meeting. Just one, it would be amiss of me not to ask, are we confident that the works of the speed limit change on the 151 will be carried out at the same time as the resurfacing works?
I think I expected that question, Chairman. Again, simply the answer is yes. The new lining plan is coming off the press, hopefully today, if not tomorrow. That will be included within our contract for delivery at the same time as the resurfacing works.
Wonderful news. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of the items, and we will now move to vote on each of the three schemes separately. So, relevant to the A6121 Ryhill Road, Stamford Strategic Resurfacing Scheme, I request, does anyone wish to move that the committee supports the recommendations to the Executive Councillors for Resources and the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as detailed on pages 171 of the report? Councillor King got there first, so seconder. Councillor Sheard. Take that to a vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's agreed. Moving on to relevant to the A17-A151 Holbeach and Fleet Hargate Strategic Resurfacing Scheme. I request a mover that the committee supports the recommendation to the Executive Councillor for Resources and the Executive Councillor of Highways and Transport as detailed on page 185 of the report. Councillor King got there before I asked. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Edgis-Zagowski just got there. Could I please ask for a vote? All those in favour? I will abstain just because I am the councillor for that one. Sorry for that. So all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's been carried, thank you. And finally, item number 3, relevant to the A52 Levington and Holthoff End Strategic Resurfacing Scheme. And we need a mover that the committee supports the recommendations to the Executive Councillor for Resources and Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport as detailed on page 201 of the report. Could I invite a mover, Councillor Zagowski, and a seconder, who's Councillor Reeve. Wonderful. We'll now take it to a vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Councillor Vernon, thank you. Wonderful. That has been agreed. Finally, that I ask that our comments for each of the aforementioned reports, as these have been captured by the scrutiny officer, be shared with the executive councillors for their consideration ahead of any decision dates. Thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Brooks. Moving on to item 10, Highways Q4 Performance Report, the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2025. This scrutiny report can be found on pages 215 to 258 of the agenda pack. This report sets out the performance of the Highways Service, including Highway Maintenance Scheme updates, Lincolnshire Highways Performance Reports and Highways Complaints Reports. It is asked that we review and comment on the detail of the performance contained in the report and recommend any changes or actions to lead officers and to the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport. The report will be presented by Jonathan Evans, Head of Highways, Client and Contractual Management Services. Over to you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors. So I'm going to run through the performance report as outlined, Year 5, Q4, and I'll start at just pick out some of the main themes. We've got a fair bit to get through, so I'll pick up the pace. So the highway performance report, let's start at 1.1. We've got the scores there, which just sort of outline where we're at for Q4. So we start with the Alliance. That's our overarching strategic objectives of the 3 contracts that we've got out. So we scored this quarter 90 out of 100. That's up from last quarter at 89. Within the set of performance indicators, as a client, as a county council, we monitor ourselves. So we've got 10 performance indicators. As a client authority, we scored 83. That's down from last quarter, from 89. The main areas of focus were early contractor involvement with the contractors, given that when we're starting a scheme and we want to get it to site, we see the benefits of us engaging in that process early, and we missed a few key dates in that period. So that performance indicators, keeping us to account. Move next to the Highway Works Term Service Contract. That's operated by Balfour Beatty. That's the highest score it's achieved since 2020, scoring 87.2. That's up from 80.6 last quarter. Moving on to the Professional Services Contract, operated by WSP. That's our Professional Services Top-Up Contract, where we reach back to get professional services and skills outside of our remit. We scored 78.7. That's down ever so slightly from the previous quarter. And the final one, the Traffic Signals Term Contract, which is operated by COLAS, scored 97 out of 100. That's up from last quarter from 94. And again, that's the highest score on contract to date. Out of those performance measures, there a summary of each, a breakdown of further 10 measures. No performance indicators fell below the minimum performance level. And just for the councillors to understand that in a bit more detail, we have a process of implementing low service damages if the performance isn't at the required level. So each of those 10 performance indicators have a financial penalty. Some of those within a quarter can be as much as 25,000. We also, whenever we have a performance issue, we implement an improvement plan process so that we are looking to get that response in line for the next quarterly update. Move now on to the contract-specific updates. The 3 strategic highway delivery contracts have now completed Year 5 and are underway with Year 6. The Highway Works contract has been extended to the 31st of March 2032. The Professional Services contract has been extended to the 31st of March 2028. and the traffic signals provider has not been extended, and a new procurement is due to go live from the 1st of April 2026. In terms of an update on that matter, the contract opportunity is being advertised, suppliers have bid, and in the next couple of weeks we'll be notifying the outcome of that process. So that will then launch into sort of sealing the contracts and mobilising in advance of the 1st of April 2026, and there may or may not be a replacement to the COLAS contract. Moving on now, those that have seen this report in the past, it's been a similar one for the last 10 years, but we've added an item headed budget. I thought that was useful to bring it out of the discussion. So the combined capital and revenue budget for the Highway Maintenance Service for 25-26 is approximately 110 million. Based on this level of funding, it's forecast that the Highway Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy objectives to hold the key assets in a steady state whilst implementing an accelerated improvement on the unclassified roads will continue to be achieved. The additional 500 million funding announced within the autumn statement as an increase to 24-25 maintenance for all English transport regions is anticipated to remain next financial year. However, the formal announcement has not been made. In line with the funding requirements, Lincolnshire County Council has issued the Highway Maintenance Transparency Report, information on our website. That was a really important step that we've got done over the last couple of months. Not doing that step would have put at risk potentially 4 million of funding. So completing that, issuing the information around our pothole figures, the way we approach our highway works, largely Lincolnshire County Council has put all that information out in the past anyway, so it's not a big burden, but there are other authorities that have had to do a lot of work there. A point that I wanted to highlight within the report, the current Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy that spans 2022 to 2025 will end later this year. The new strategy is anticipated to be developed for publication at the start of 2026. So that'll be really useful to get the councillors of this committee and the exec portfolio holder involved in that to set our strategy for the next phase, align budget and delivery resource over the next 4 years. That's an interesting phase. I'll now just dig into each of the contracts specifically, and I'll start with the Balfour Beatty at section 1.4. And I'll just run through some of the challenges and improvements that we've got on that contract. There's been an increase in the overall score for the Highway Works term contract this quarter. The most pleasing aspects are the reactive service, the emergency response times, and the winter maintenance have all had positive improvements this quarter. A good example is Performance Indicator 3. We normally gauge that as a secondary measure of the number of live jobs within the work basket. At this moment in time, as of last night, we had 2,150 jobs in the work basket. In the contract to date, that's been as high as 9,000. So that just gives you a feel of how up to date the service is and catching up or in line with the work that's been delivered on the network. Another area of interest that I think is worth highlighting, the service is currently arranging a second trial of the Pothole Pro on contract that is due to commence from September 2025. Following the lessons learned from the first trial, the Pothole Pro will be focused on the reactive patch work stream. And just to give that a bit of context, that's instead of sort of individual potholes, it's going to be focused on clusters of potholes and doing patches that range between 5 metres and 30 metres squared. The reason we think that's necessary is because the Pothole Pro is, it needs to be delivering that higher output. When you compare it to a traditional two-operative crew, its day rate is much higher, so it needs to be focused on sort of the higher output areas of the network. So we'll be really interested to see how that gets on in September, and I invite all members of the Highways Transportation Scrutiny Committee to come along and see the Pothole Pro in practice. Moving on now to the Professional Services Contract, WSP. Professional Services score for Year 5, Quarter 4 was 78.78. Again, some of the challenges and improvements that we got with that contract. The pipeline of work for the Highway Service and the wider Place Directorate remains positive and aligns with the funding levels allocated to the Highway Service. The contractual top-up via the Professional Services contract enables LCC to reach back into the wider WSP to resource up to meet this demand for either highways or the wider Place Directorate. Some task orders that have been raised in the last quarter of note are planning advice, groundwater analysis, capacity and support with Lincoln Clasket Gate, and development of our urban traffic models. Another positive example is WSP are assisting us with some green light funding that we received from the Department of Transport a year ago, looking at the mover or the flow of traffic through some of our urban centres. Move now on to the traffic signals term service contract, which is operated by COLAS. As I said earlier, the score for the quarter is 97 out of 100, highest in the contract to date. And just to highlight some exceptional performance in there, we had 66 emergency faults, which are our 2-hour response time, of which all 66 were attended in time, and also the same for our 12-hour contract response times. We had 532 of them all attended in time. As part of the annual performance measure review process, a new performance measure for the start of year 6 on contract has been agreed to look at the number of temporary fault clearances that are entered by engineers after attending a fault. They're used generally when an engineer doesn't have the correct part or perhaps expertise to deal with an issue that has been reported. The reason we wanted to bring that in was just to raise the standard a little bit more and identify those that aren't a first-time fix, because that's what we're looking for this area of the contract. What that does is make sure that our performance metrics and measures stay live, really, because we want it to be challenging for the contractors. Move now on to complaints. This is a bit of a bumper edition. You've got the Highway Complaints Q4 report, and you've also got the annual report. During Q4, the Highway Service received a total of 11,900 Fix My Street inquiries and 8,700 calls and emails to the Customer Service Centre. The Customer Relations team received a total of 47 contacts from individuals wishing to give feedback, report issues, or complain about the Highway Service, which equates to about 0.23%. And just to give that some sort of background information, typically a score of less than 1% is generally good. So that's in a really positive place in terms of the volume of complaints and interactions we're getting. The number of complaints entering the formal process has decreased by 35% in comparison to the previous quarter and decreased by 58% in comparison to the same quarter of the previous year. And again, that's during a time, during the seasonal nature, coming off the back of sort of winter. That's normally the peak period for winter, so it is positive to see those results. In terms of the main report, some of the themes that we're seeing, it's really nice to see that potholes aren't number one in terms of the complaints. It's surprising, but it's great to see. However, we have just seen a sign of them returning in the Q4 data. Again, that could be a seasonal shift, but it's something that we'll need to keep an eye on. The main area of concern does relate to communication, with 36% of all complaints as a result of insufficient information. So that's something that we need to dig into a bit more. It seems to be working really well for certain service delivery arms, so stuff like our scheduled schemes, as we've run through today. We're doing media press releases, we're notifying letter drops, but sometimes on the high volume, lower cost schemes, we're obviously not getting that quite right. So that's something for us to focus on, and that's probably a decision around volume and cost of staffing time to implement that level of communication, but it's something we need to be aware of moving forward. We've got the Highways Customer and Liaison Strategy coming to this Highways and Transportation Scrutiny Committee later this year. That will focus on how we are trying to communicate, and it'll be good for councillors to be involved in that, setting that sort of objectives and the strategy going forward. We've potentially got some new public-facing platforms in relation to how we notify our programme going forward. That might be something that will help in this area, and also the Fix My Street improvement. To date, it's been very much a fault reporting platform, but we think we can surface more information through that to try and self-serve as much as we can so that it raises information to the public. Okay, moving on, we've got the Department of Transport Road Condition Statistics update. This is an annual data that I bring to the Highways and Transportation Scrutiny Committee. So the latest data received from our condition survey is shown within the report. What we're looking at here is the percentage of roads where maintenance should be considered. This is a condition data largely brought about through our laboratory, who are looking at scanner information and course visual inspections. So all of our network is surveyed over either an annual, 6-monthly annual, or every 4 years, depending on which part of the network. So it's sort of a moving picture of, from an engineering perspective, the condition of our roads. So I'll run through each of them and just give you an overview of thoughts of where we are. So the condition of the principal roads, which is our A road network, that accounts of the 9,000 kilometre network. We've got about 1,000 kilometres in this category. The actual score was 2.5%, so that's 2.5% of roads where maintenance should be considered. Our target, in line with our strategy, is less than 3%. So generally, that's in a good place. However, we did see an increase of 0.6% from what was a static position. We believe this is due to a change in surveying contractor between 23-24 and 24-25. The Highway Service is investigating the change in condition and will monitor closely to ensure that we remain under the target of 3%. What we don't want to be doing is just seeing a worsening of that A road network and an upturn and us not respond to it. And we respond to it by allocating more budget fundamentally. When we compare ourselves to other authorities, we are better than average, which from a strategy perspective, it's a good place to be. These are the highest risk roads, the highest speed, the most travelled. From a safety and usage perspective, that's where you'd probably want to be. Moving on now to the condition of our non-principal roads. When we say that, that's our B and C class roads. Of the 9,000 kilometres, we've got 4,000 kilometres in this category. Our actual score of 6.2% was received, and our target was 7. This category of roads is doing exactly what we want it to do. So it's remained consistent, static over the last 5 years, in line with our highways infrastructure asset management strategy. When we compare ourselves to other authorities, we're slightly above the English average. So that's something, it's just pitching ourselves in terms of that public perception of when they drive around the UK. This category is sort of just on the cusp of below average. Move now onto the condition of our unclassified roads. So the remaining 4,000 kilometre of network. Our actual score was 23.2% and our target was less than 25. Between 23 and 24, we achieved an improvement of 2.3% in this network, which is a fantastic achievement and aligns with what we're trying to do with our strategy. Just to give that a bit more sort of context, the roads are always deteriorating to some degree. What we are trying to do is manage those either through preventative maintenance or by intervention, as we've run through today. For the unclassified road network, we've moved what were in a red or requiring maintenance category into an amber or green. So that equates to about 92 kilometres or 57 miles that have been taken out of that category and moved into a better state. Move now on to the conclusion. You'll be pleased to hear Lincolnshire Highways team and the strategic partners continue to deliver an efficient and effective service. External verification of this is provided by a recent peer review by the Future Highway Research Group that was carried out in December 24, which confirms our continued position as one of the sector leaders. Funding levels for the remainder of 25-26 enables the service to meet the objectives of the strategy of holding the key assets in a steady state whilst implementing accelerated improvement on the unclassified roads. The condition update contained within section 4.3 confirms the strategy is being implemented. The committee is asked to consider and comment on the detailed performance contained in the report and any changes or actions to the Executive Member for Highways and Transport. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes my update.
Thank you, Mr Evans. I would now like to invite members of the committee to make any relevant statement or ask questions. Councillor Robinson, do we have any speakers?
Yeah, Councillor Grantham.
Thank you. I do have 4 questions, but I'll do one question at a time just in case any councillors want to go in. When it comes to the disincentives for underscore, which I'm happy to see, are there incentives to that as well? Incentives. So if they do above the score, do they get a financial contribution?
Yep, it's a complex answer, but I will try and do it in the best way I can. What we've got with the Balfour Beatty and Colas contracts is a target cost contract. So we allow the contractors to bid back in 2020 a set of prices. Those prices set a target price for each job that we issue. What we actually pay through the contractor is open book plant labour material costs. So we generate a thing called pain and gain on the contract. The mechanisms that we have in place are that whenever a job comes under value, there is a gain share, and all the performance measures in the background are driving a share of that 50-50. So if the contractor's performing really well, it can go as high as 75%. If they're not performing, it drops to 25%. So in terms of incentives, we are incentivised with the contractor to work collaboratively, make sure we're delivering best value for the public. The benefits are that in line with the performance indicators and their actual costs, those are all combined together to make sure that the contractors are generating or working with us to incentivise the service.
Yeah, I'll allow another question and then I'll go on to some other councils and come back. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that we're getting the pothole trial in September. farmers aware now, we need a gang that can keep up with the Pothole Pro behind it. Are they going through training to keep up with that Pothole Pro? And just as a recommendation, hopefully Councillor Clark agrees with me, can we first get that in Lincoln first, please?
Thank you, Councillor Grantham. You're right to say that and identify the Pothole Pro itself is a bit of kit equipment from JCB. The attachments that it have is sort of a road milling aspect, so it can plane out the surface. It's got an excavator arm that sweeps, and it can also collect the road planings and deposit into a vehicle. A key part of the trial is looking at the reinstatement of the excavation that it's created. So whilst you could have a very efficient front end to the job, you've still got the crew behind that are either working from a hot box and are laying asphalt in a traditional way. So what you don't want to have is your JCB Pothole Pro racing off and doing lots of excavations without that reinstatement crew behind. All the workforce are either on the Pothole Pro are being trained up at the moment to get qualifications, and also the reinstatement crew will be monitoring that as part of the trial to make sure that we keep up the pace. It may be in time that we need 2 reinstatement crews for a JCB Pothole Pro, but obviously comes with that additional expense. What you don't want to have is standing time on either crew so that you are productive throughout. So that's something that we'll be monitoring as part of the trial, and yeah, more than happy to get those demos and come out and have a look at it.
Yeah, Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. Your complaints were very enlightening, but the big complaint that I get as a councillor is that when somebody reports something, somebody then comes out within the next period of time, puts some yellow paint to highlight where it's going to be repaired, but perhaps there's another smaller area nearby that doesn't get picked up, and then the team turn up to do the repairs, but because it hasn't been marked with the yellow paint, they don't do it and move on, and then they have to report again. They naively thought that it would be fixed at the time. Now, I've actually spoken to some of the Balfour Beatty contractors, and there's a bit of a conflict here from what I'm told. They say that officially they're told if they see something, do it, but unofficially they're told if they don't do it, there'll be no consequences, and if they do it, they might not get paid for it because it's not on the paperwork, only the bit that was highlighted with the yellow paint on the paperwork. Can you just clarify so that I can tell my voters that this is happening, that doesn't happen or shouldn't happen or whatever? Just clarify that situation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Reeve. In terms of the direct response of can a contractor fix a fault nearby, the answer is yes. We deem within our contract to allow them up to 30 metres either way of that fault or within the traffic management setup. What we probably don't want to be doing is on a sort of a complex road closure is spotting a pothole and then moving to it. Our issue that we find is trying to balance productivity and us interacting with our infrastructure policy. So when we intervene with a pothole fault, we'll normally go in of any pothole greater than 40 millimetres. That's in line with our policy. What we don't want to have is a contractor just moving around the network of their own accord. If they were given the free rein of just fix a pothole, or if it's close to the next one, fix a pothole, especially if it's not at that 40 millimetre level. So the answer is yes, they can. Our officers that are going out and marking up a pothole will be looking and measuring the intervention depth, and we are intervening at those sites where we need to intervene from a safety perspective. There's a real balance here politically around intervening at those sites and doing every defect that they can visually see on the network. The downside is that we become very unproductive by sort of chasing potholes when we want to be funneling that into sort of a planned and efficient response.
Thank you. I suppose it is difficult though, but what a lot of people think is a stitching time saves 9, and that is very often the case, but I have been told by the contractors that they were told by their bosses, you do not do extra work because we don't get paid for it if you do. Wait while the yellow paint's on it and we'll go back to it.
I will, if it's okay, take away an action there to clarify that position with Balfour Beatty, make sure that the supply chain are fully aware of the contractual clauses that we've got in place that allow them to do that. So we call them contractor identified faults, a CIF. They can raise a job type within the field, take a photo of it and notify us back. So we have the commercial arrangement in place. We just need to make sure that every team is in that same position. So I'll take an action to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Councillor Sheard.
Thank you. Just with regards to Fix My Street, it's absolutely superb at the moment. I'm really encouraging residents to use it, and people are getting on board. What they like with it is the simplicity of it. So all I would say is, please, if you're going to add information to it, don't make it into something complex, because it's such a useful tool at the moment. So just be considerate if you are playing about with it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really nice to get positive feedback in what we're doing there. Fix My Street is a brilliant tool. The financial cost of it, considering the volume of inquiries it handles, we think it probably deals with about 300,000 interactions with members of the public every year, and for a cost of around 20,000. So it's a really proactive bit of software that we've got there. I'll take that on board, definitely, that we don't want to overcomplicate something for something that is a fault response system. Wherever we're trying to do is just when a member of the public select an area, it surfaces information just so they understand either that we've got a scheme coming up or key information about where the actual asset is. That just, what we're seeing is sometimes it gets a bit more information at the right phase will help us all in that communication, but I will take that on board. Thank you.
Back to Councillor Grantham.
Thank you very much. When it comes to the council hubs, which I really enjoy, can we get a bit more data onto that? For instance, I'd like to see resurfacing, footpaths, and broken that down into data from Fix My Street or full resurfacing, if that's okay.
Yep, I was just talking to Councillor Gibson earlier. We've got a thing called Forward Programme Briefs. It was brought in probably a year and a half ago, which was how we interact with councillors on our programme of schemes that we've got in the pipeline. We think that needs probably a relaunch as part of the new administration coming in. We've communicated that out, but I think it's got potentially lost. So that's something we can get out to councillors just to differentiate. We're aware of these works in the next 2 to 3 years, and that will help communication at parish meetings or with your members of the public, just to explain, yes, the Highway Service is aware of that scheme and they're working on it. We'll also move or suggest that we develop our programme that's published on our LCC website. That's in place at the moment. At the moment, we're only showing our current year schemes. What we'd like to do is get to a place where we've got 2 to 3 years worth of scheme and the actual treatment type as well, because I think that is part of that understanding, whether it's a surface dressing scheme or a full reconstruction, as we've discussed today. That, you know, it's nice for councillors and the members of the public to understand that.
Did you have another question, Grant? That's fine. Councillor Bunny.
Oh, thank you. I was just really wanting to pick up the comments on Fix My Street. I would totally agree that it is a much improved service, not always easily accessible in some of the rural areas because on one's phone, and that has caused some problems. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but certainly in areas that I know of where you try to take a picture and get it downloaded, it all goes a little bit wrong because Fix My Street isn't being picked up in the areas where there is a weak signal. The other thing I think is important is I spent quite a bit of time talking to people explaining what some of the responses mean because they're automatic, and I think it would be particularly useful if something could be done about that to show people that really it is working, and just because it says this or it's going to be delayed by 14 days, and then it's not that it's being ignored, but again, a particularly positive thing about that. The other thing I just wanted to make a comment was about the Pothole Pro. I understand you quite rightly have invited members of this committee to attend a session on that. I suspect every councillor has got potholes on their inboxes quite regularly, and I would suggest as the project comes through it might well be worth inviting all councillors to have a look at that, because I think it's something that we certainly get lobbied from by JCB, but it would also be useful for them to understand how the system works.
Thank you, Councillor Bunny. In relation to Fix My Street, again, really positive to hear those comments. In terms of network issues, I guess that's a step further away from our responsibility in terms of highways, but we will mention it to Fix My Street of how potentially it can work offline, so that it can capture the information, think that it's done the task, and then maybe the software could come back online once it's got a signal and make sure it processes those bits. We've got the same issues that we face with our Confirm Connect, which is the software that our contractors use out in the field. It needs to work offline as well as online. So that's something, a comment that we can take back. And then I guess I'd just reiterate that the platform's also available on sort of a desktop or a laptop, so that those members of the public, if they can't, for whatever reason, raise it there and then in the field, they can report it later in the day if they can. In terms of the Pothole Pro, yeah, fantastic feedback in terms of widening this out. We'll take that as an action.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. The complaints about flooding, you know, obviously you're going to complain if you get flooded, but all the eggs have been put in one basket now that you've got to use Fix My Street. What happens if the electric goes and you've got no power to Fix My Street, your phones are underwater?
We do still have the customer service centre and emails. I know probably emails wouldn't work in that same scenario, but the customer service centre is probably the best way in, or our LCC floodline, or even if it's an emergency, I'd be contacting the police or fire and rescue. That's probably the ultimatum of where you go to, unless there's another particular issue that you're raising there, Councillor Clark.
You know, when you're going to use Fix My Street, are they going to get an answer straight away, not ornament, what, you know, saying that we'll look into it?
Some of the different statuses act in different ways depending on the work stream type. That first one is normally just letting the member of the public know that we've received it. So that inquiry will get allocated to an officer, more than likely in some of the teams that we've got here. We've got Cara and Sean attending. That inquiry will be redistributed for them to review. So whether that's an on-site inspection or whether it's looking at a desk-based look at the programs or work types. So that is just saying to the member of the public, we've received it, thank you for raising it, and we're looking into it. The next phase will come when an officer of the council has either been to site, done something with it, issued it to the contractor or replied to the member of the public, and that will then trigger the next response. Councillor Bunny, in his response, highlighted sometimes it's not always perfect. I'd say 99% of the 300,000 is good and is giving that meaningful response. Sometimes on specific scenarios, on specific work types, sometimes that comms isn't perfect because it's an automated one based off a status trigger. What we need to do as part of the Fix My Street improvement pipeline is make sure we iron those ones out. So that's, again, something that the service is working on.
Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much indeed. I've just got a few points to raise on this, but I'd like to begin by just commenting on the number of complaints in Q4 for 24-25. I really do feel that is a really, really fantastic figure. And although no complaint should be celebrated, I think the decrease sort of quarter on quarter and year on year is really outstanding, and I think that the team should be absolutely congratulated and celebrated for that. Having said that, the thing which does concern me, which we have mentioned previously, is that the complaints do tend to revolve around communication. We've talked about at past scrutiny meetings how we can improve the Fix My Street platform by taking away the standard messages which some people don't understand are standard, and I can totally appreciate that if you have an issue with flooding, to say sort of we'll get back to you within 14 days is not acceptable. And my understanding was from previous meetings that that had been amended and that there was a process in place to be able to sort of almost put a new message, sort of this is a peak period, please ignore the time frame given, you will be sort of got back to quicker than that. I do think we as councillors have a role in educating our residents that this is a standard message, and I know that this is something that we've discussed as a council previously, that when we go to our parish council meetings and town council meetings, we should be highlighting the fact that this is a standard message and that in extraordinary circumstances this will be different. The other points that I'd just like to make about the continuity of key staff on page 232, that's previously been identified as being an issue, and I note that you mentioned on that page that there are now measures in place to deal with that. Do you feel that those measures are successful and operating? And then the final point I'd like to make is just regarding the Highways Customer Liaison coming. I think that will be massively beneficial and provides us as a committee with an excellent opportunity to feed into what we're hearing from our residents and try and secure improvements, but also noting keeping the simplicity of the system that we have, which is such a huge benefit. So yeah, thank you, but I really do think that's an excellent result on the complaints. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. In terms of the sort of the overall position on communications and complaints, I think partially it's been driven by positive funding over the last couple of years. Our network's in a better place in terms of those reactive responses and the condition data that I've outlined today. Potentially we're seeing the benefits of that position. In terms of the split of communication issues relative to what were flooding and pothole inquiries or complaints, I suspect, but I will look into it in more detail, we're getting less potholes and flooding complaints, and the communication issues have just sort of now become the top of the ones that we're getting. But we should keep pushing, and anything that we can do to improve Fix My Street or the way we're communicating, we want to be doing that. In terms of key staff, the industry seems to have settled down from a construction perspective. We were really struggling to recruit specialist roles in drainage, mainly street lighting, and during that sort of back end of lockdown, people were moving, and in a new era of teams where people can work remote and not be based in that authority, it became a very competitive environment. So at this moment in time, we're getting good recruitment levels, vacancies are being filled largely, so in a much more positive place, and it sort of de-risked that from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And yeah, looking forward to bring the liaison strategy in September.
Any more speakers? Councillor Grantham.
Thank you very much. When it comes to the Pothole Pro, obviously we don't do anything less than 20 mil for a 28-day period. Because you need quite a big, large service area, are we going for potholes that are less than 20 mil? Because if that's the case, I highly recommend Bucknell Avenue down my division. It's got a whole side street that's crumbled, but even though the highways won't do it yet because I haven't got to that stage, we'll be looking at that.
To start with, we're trying to replicate the sort of the service delivery that we would do with traditional sort of rival equipment. So that might be a skid steer bobcat or a multi-hog, certain bits of kit that are comparable. What we don't want to do as part of the trial is change it fundamentally before we sort of understand it. So I think there'll be different phases of the trial. We want to just do it like for like at the moment, where we're focusing on the reactive patching. In terms of the response times, you know, we'll do a 24-hour, 7, 28 or 80-day response depending on the specific hierarchy. We're normally for a carriageway looking to intervene a fault depth greater than or equal to 40 millimetres. However, given this conversation earlier, if there's a defect nearby within 30 metres and a traffic management setup, we can interact. I guess what we don't want to do is, again, with this bit of kit, is go chasing small potholes. This is about larger sort of patching schemes to make it really productive and make it good value for money. Because when we trialled this previously at our depot in Horncastle, we just replicated a traditional potholing gang, and what we found is the drive time just made it not good value for money ultimately. The day work rate in comparison to a standard pothole might be 4 times as much. So you're almost expecting 4 times as much output for it to stack up, and that'll be an interesting part of this trial.
Councillor Grantham, I know you're really excited about this Pothole Pro. Have you got any questions regarding the performance report? Is the next one regarding the report? Is it another one on the pothole? Could I suggest that I know we're really excited about this bit of machinery. Can we take the questions after the committee meeting and we'll do that? Is there any other questions? Councillor Bailey.
It's more just a statement, really. Just it's great that we're looking into improving communication through Fix My Street for residents, and I appreciate officers for taking that feedback on board from complaints, and I look forward to seeing how we as committee and councillors can help to see how we can best communicate that to residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to, echo Councillor Vernon's for highlighting the automated response. Maybe a bit more AI generated, a bit more helpful and appropriate for what they are reporting to. And I think as councillors, we need to let everybody know that these are automated, but it is very important. And Councillor Bunny, your suggestion also, I think if the Pothole Pro is in our area, let us know, because I'm sure Councillor Grantham will be the first one to go and see how it gets on. But thank you all for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. And I move that the committee endorses the report, that our satisfaction be recorded in relation to assurances received by the officers, and I ask that our comments from today's discussion are cascaded across the relevant teams and shared with the portfolio holder for their information and relevant actioning. Does anyone dissent? If so, please raise your hand. Thank you, that is agreed. Moving on to item 11, Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item can be found on pages 259 to 268 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of the work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara Hatziyohanu, the Scrutiny Officer. Our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which may be included for consideration in the work programme. Over to you, Ms. Hatziyohanu.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Item 11 is indeed the committee's work programme, which outlines the upcoming items for future meetings and helps members to ensure that scrutiny remains focused and purposeful. Looking ahead to our next meeting, scheduled for the 8th of September 2025, members will consider 5 substantive items. These are the rail recovery and strategic role in providing connectivity, supporting Lincolnshire communities and economy for 2024-2025, which is a scrutiny update and position report. We will receive the Highways Q1 Performance Report, which covers the period between the 1st of April to the 30th of June 2025, and that is again a quarterly service performance monitoring report as we've received it today. We will also, as a bolt-on, receive the Major Work Schemes Report, which is again a quarterly service performance monitoring report. We shall also receive in that same meeting the Highways Gully Cleansing, Drainage Repair Systems and Surface Water Flooding Report, which is again a Service Performance Monitoring Report. And finally, the Road Safety Partnership Annual Update Report, which is an annual position report submitted to this committee. Since the publication of this agenda pack, some additional items have been confirmed for future meetings. These will be reflected in the next iteration of this work programme. For the meeting on the 8th of December 2025, in addition to the performance that we will receive for highways for Q2, members will also receive further reports on the transport performance for quarters 1 and 2 and the road safety performance quarters 1 and 2. We shall also receive a pre-decision scrutiny report entitled The Revised Definitive Map Modification Order Prioritisation Policy, which will be considered by the Executive Councillor for a decision between the 10th and the 19th of December. Finally, for our meeting on the 16th of March 2026, alongside, again, the Q3 performance reporting for highways. We shall receive the transport performance for Q3 and the road safety performance for Q3 as well. These additions aim to help to ensure that members maintain oversight across all areas of highways, transport and road safety, and they can contribute to key decisions at appropriate stages. So this concludes my update to you, and I'm happy to take any questions or any further suggestions from members on items that you would like to see being included in the future work programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. I would now like to invite members of the committee to make any relevant statement or ask questions. Councillor Robinson, do we have any?
Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 points. Obviously, we've just heard from Mr Evans about having the Highways Custody Liaison team coming to present. Do we have any idea when that will be at the scrutiny panel for discussion? And secondly, at the last meeting, we spoke about the rail recovery, which I note is on the agenda for the September meeting. And I'd just like to clarify whether it's been possible to arrange for those to come in person, as we discussed at the last meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, to take the last question first, because it's the easy part. Yes, we have made arrangements for all external guests to be in attendance face-to-face here in the council chamber. Thank you.
Yeah, and in relation to the customer liaison strategy, we are intending to bring this, if possible, to the 8th September, if that's agreeable with the Scrutiny Committee.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Any more speakers? That's it, Mr Chairman.
Thank you for your question and comment. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that we note the report and endorse the existing work programme as detailed in pages 259 to 268, with the caveat of any additional items highlighted in the Scrutiny Officer's presentation to be reflected in the next published iteration of this document. If anyone dissents, please indicate now. Thank you. That has agreed. And that now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you to the members of the public and press for your attendance, and here everyone in the chamber. Thank you so much. Take care.